All right. Well, again, welcome everyone. It's good to have you tonight, and thought we'd start off with just a little bit of a summary of our trip. We went to Fort Worth, Texas for the week, and then traveled from there last week to San Benito. And as many mentioned, there have been some wonderful blessings there. Obviously, the ordination of our brother Ramon. And also the fact that it does coincide with the church being there in that part of the native work for 50 years. And so we were commenting on how that is a blessing, a jubilee year for the group, for the work there. And, we opened the meeting, the weekend on Saturday morning with a prayer meeting. And we spent the first half hour or so of the prayer meeting just talking about what we were going to pray about, really in a detailed manner, laying out the things that we wanted to bring before the Lord and to entrust the weekend to Him. And then we began to pray for another hour or so, maybe an hour and a half after that. So a powerful spirit already at that point. And as we went from there into the other meetings and the rest of the weekend, we felt more blessings, more and more began to join us, and we had a large crowd filling the big and beautiful building we have there in San Benito. If you haven't seen it, I can tell you that there have been so many things going on there, and so many new visitors coming, that it really is, I think, the beginning of something very special and potentially significant. We have actually been trying to go there for a while with the MBA as the region officers and stirring up the membership there. And we began to fast and pray for the mission weekly for months prior to the trip. And as we were fasting and praying, we got a report from Brother Larry that about a dozen or so of their members, a little more, who have been dealing with addictions and drug and alcohol abuse, willingly admitted themselves to recovery programs. And that was a large, it's actually over 20 members, about half the group. And so they weren't there this weekend because they were in treatment. But Larry was excited to see that event and to see them beginning to take that initiative to confront these things. And many of them, I think, have struggled with attending and just dealing with the things that they're facing. And we went into Sunday with a number of the region apostles, the ministry from the NAOC, and many others who visited. And when we began to open the service, we felt a blessing. We felt some, frankly, incredible inspiration in the speaking. And then we began to circle around our brother and prepare to ordain him. And a mighty prayer was offered for the Lord to come and be with us, to give us the power and spirit to conduct this ordination. And then Brother John Straccia came forth to wash our brother Ramon's feet and offered a powerful prayer. And afterwards, many came to him and said, "That was quite an amazing prayer you offered." And he kind of commented that he didn't even remember what he said. It was the Spirit taking over in that moment. And then Brother Larry came forth to ordain Ramon. And as he was doing that, he almost questioned the Lord, show us that this is your calling and your will. And as he was praying that way, Brother Scott Griffith had the gift of tongues and confirmed that the Lord, in fact, was calling our brother. And afterwards, Brother Ramon addressed us, and there was another Navajo man there to interpret some of what was being said into the Navajo language, and we had many natives there for the event that were there in support. Some who worked with Larry in the school system for many years, and not until here recently did they all understand the connections and how they all knew Ramon. And members of the community, the school system, natives that have been there all their lives began to testify and show their support for Ramon, that they were excited about this ordination. They had never stepped foot in our church building before, and now they know that we're there, and they're excited about what's going on. And prior to that, we had tried to visit last month to San Benito, and there was a passing, one of the original contacts and friends of the Watson family when they first moved there. They were involved with the original facilities and everything, passed away. And during the funeral, there were hundreds of natives that came into that building, into San Benito, that hadn't been there before. So over the past few weeks, I can't tell you how many new faces have come into the mission because of all these events. And so it was certainly a tremendous blessing. And I can tell you that while we were ordaining Ramon, Lynette asked me, how does it feel to stand in that circle? And I said, in that moment, I felt like we were levitating. It was so powerful. So we praise God for these things and for the excitement that we have. I can say too that there was just a spirit of connection, of fellowship throughout the week, and we really had some wonderful opportunities just to catch up and be with the saints. So excited to share what the Lord has been doing, and with that, I have a comment here from Brother George about a healing. Is there anything you wanted to share about that, brother? I'm not sure if you're on mute, but maybe we'll get to hear about that more at the end. Something about a miraculous healing. I think we'll go ahead and transition to our lesson tonight, and I'm pretty excited about it. We have an interesting question, and I'm curious what you might have thought if you saw it. The question or subject tonight is the gospel compelling? And you might think, well, that's an odd question to ask, and it might depend on how you interpret the word compelling. So we're going to kind of come at this from a few different angles here tonight, and see how the Lord inspires us this evening. Let me go ahead and share my slides here, and we'll start off with this verse here. It says in the 4th chapter here of Ether, therefore repent all ye ends of the earth, and come unto me, and believe in my gospel. And this is really the invitation that the Lord is giving to the world. And the question is, really kind of from the world's perspective, do they find the gospel compelling? Do they find it interesting enough to heed the call, to heed the invitation that the Lord is putting forth, to repent and come unto the Lord and believe, as it says here, in my gospel? And, I think that our goal tonight here is to prove that, yes, the gospel is compelling in some sense. It is of an urgent value, and we need to be able, as the saints of God, to convey it to others in a way that would capture their interest, that they might awaken to this need for their souls, and the beautiful way that the Lord has laid out for us to come in and be to the gospel and be filled, to be lifted up and to be healed and to be blessed in so many ways that are, to say they're compelling isn't sufficient, really. And so I thought I'd start here with a definition. So the word compelling means to evoke interest, attention, or admiration in a powerfully irresistible way. That's an interesting definition. And certainly, I think those are good words to use in conjunction with the gospel. I hope we feel that way. And I hope that people in the world would feel that way, that it's interesting, that it's worthy of our attention and time, that we would give the Lord time and attention in our lives for what he's trying to do for us. And so to kind of help build a little more context here, I have a couple of perspectives, some scriptures to bring forth. And this this first one in the 42nd chapter of Alma, I think it's giving us some insight into the manner or perspective of God. And it says here, therefore, O my son, whosoever will come may come and partake of the waters of life freely. And whosoever will not come, the same is not compelled to come. But in the last day, it shall be restored unto him according to his deeds. So this is a fairly remarkable, incredible statement here, that we are made by the Lord, set free to do what we want, given free will. We find ourselves in a condition, a fallen condition in which we need the redemption of Christ, but yet we are not forced. We are not compelled to come and partake of that. And so, in one sense, we hope that the world and that we ourselves would find the gospel of great interest, worthy of all of our time and focus. But on the other hand, we know that the Lord doesn't compel us in as much as forcing us to partake of it. It has to be a choice that we make. And so we get this, this sense that the Lord wants our sincere love. He doesn't want us to be forced into a relationship with him if we don't want it. He gives us that, that choice to make for ourselves. A bit more here, also in Alma, to kind of continue on with that train of thought. In the 32nd chapter, there's a few verses that I thought we could go through here to further explain. And it says, and now because ye are compelled to be humble, I'm sure you're familiar with these verses. Blessed are ye, for a man sometimes, if he is compelled to be humble, seeketh repentance. And now surely whosoever repenteth shall find mercy. And he that findeth mercy and endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. And now, as I said unto you, that because you are compelled to be humble, you were blessed. Do ye not suppose that they are more blessed who truly humble themselves because of the word? So I'll pause there and just open it up here for some discussion and see how we're all thinking about this. But it does seem like the word is kind of it's being used in different ways, perhaps. In one sense, we're not forced, but there are times when the Lord does cause events that would humble people, right? If there's a deprivation, if there's a trial, if there's a judgment, if there's poverty, like in this instance, those conditions could compel people more than if they were prosperous. And yet the Lord wants us ideally to make the choice of our own accord, to humble ourselves and believe in him.
Are you talking, brother, about the restored gospel? When you say the gospel is compelling, are you centering on the restored gospel?
I am. I'm really thinking primarily about us today and, the gospel we have to offer in the present time, and whether the recipient, the hearer of our message, would find it compelling.
Brother Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah. My phone was locked up. I was having a hard time trying to get unmuted before. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I just read on my Gmail an experience. Well, not an experience, a healing from Brother Mark Kovacic, and I would rather, if there's anybody from the family, from Mark's family or from Marlia's family on, I would rather they tell it. If not, I will. Or if my wife wants to tell it.
I don't see it, George, and they're traveling to the region conference, so nobody's on tonight from Middle Tennessee.
All right, do you want me to read it? I can read it. I'll read it then. All right. This is from Brother Mark Kovacic's sister. She wrote to him. Okay, what had happened was, I guess this would be his nephew. It's his sister's daughter. I mean, his sister's son, and his name is Carter. He was rushed to the emergency with, and I guess it was quite a bad ordeal, where he had his intestines they had a real terrible. It was tied up. I forgot what you call it. It's not written here. A blockage, really bad blockage. Yeah. And they did an ultrasound, and they said, "Oh, he's got to be operated right away." So, but the prayer went out, and they had scheduled it for the next day, or the next morning. And the prayers went out, and he was anointed. And when the doctors went to check him out the next morning, it was here's what it said: they did an ultrasound in Pittsburgh, and his intestines resolved themselves on their own. I believe the prayers were the reason he was healed. The doctor was baffled. He said that this is highly unusual. And then it says, all things are possible with God.
Amen. And I think it ties in because this is the kind of thing that we're talking about when we go to someone in the world and we begin to turn the subject to faith and to righteousness, to even salvation. You kind of feel like maybe they're not interested sometimes. In the busyness of life, they have maybe other things going on, and it's not an immediate need for people. But then when you have a health issue and you need a healing from the Lord, it can suddenly become compelling really quickly, can't it? And a testimony like this, like we just heard, can be compelling. But I think that's often the struggle that we come up against with people, is that unless they have something compelling them, they struggle perhaps, and we all do perhaps, to be attentive to the things of God.
Personally, I had no interest at all in joining the church, even after marrying Sandy, which in hindsight, it was amazing to me, because the Heaps family is a very powerful family. And I had reasons to not be trustful of churches. I came from the Catholic Church. I don't want to go into that, but it took me almost a year before I had a very powerful experience. And what compelled me was Jesus Christ, and an apparent calling by him to get serious about him and get serious about being forgiven, which he did. He forgave me. And I was very, very impressed by that. And Sandy insisted that I talk to Rusty. He came to the house and I said, what do you think I should do? And of course he said, I think you should be baptized. So I kind of slid into the church because of that. I was not compelled, nor am I today, really, truthfully, by the restored gospel. I'm definitely impressed by it. And I honestly see it as a very, as something that is not compelling to many yet. I believe it will be very compelling to many in the future, obviously, because it's a tool central to the calling of Israel. But yet, at this point, I just don't see it as that's why I very much admire your question and going there, because personally, I just don't see the restored gospel as being that compelling yet. I'm very impressed by it. I read it all the time. I love it. But compelled by it? No, I'm compelled by Jesus Christ.
Well,
I think it's,
go ahead.
excuse me. I feel that it's only compelling when you have no place else to go. You know, when people are in dire need, their words are, oh God, help me. And it becomes compelling because when there's no place else to go, when the doctors say, I can't do anything for you, what do? Then you look to God. And let's hope that we can be in touch with people like this and tell them, yes, God heals. He's able to heal.
Yeah, it's a kind of a two-sided coin, or a confusing concept, I think. You know, ultimately, again, I think what the Lord wants is for us to, of our own accord, consider the miracle of our existence and approach him with some sense of gratitude for that, and reconcile ourselves to him and love him and serve him. And it's an incredible long suffering or patience or mercy on his part that he would point out our need for him sometimes through trials. And the trials that we face would bring us hopefully to a recognition of God in our lives and the importance of that. But sadly, I think the Lord really wants us to serve him without that. He doesn't want us to suffer. He also doesn't want us to be, again, forced into it. So in the sense of, is the gospel interesting and worthwhile? I certainly think that we would say it's compelling in that sense. But you know, the world may not see it that way without some other pressing motivation upon them, right? But we'll go a little further here with these scriptures and see if we can't add even more clarity here. So it goes on here. I think it's the 15th verse. Yea, he that truly humbleth himself and repenteth of his sins and endureth to the end, the same shall be blessed, yea, much more blessed than they who are compelled to be humble because of their exceeding poverty. So in other words, we can find blessing in trials that would turn us to God and wake us up somewhat to awareness of our need for the Lord. But there's still a cost for not having done so on our own accord. And that cost is these greater blessings. We could be more blessed, it says here, if we humble ourselves and repent of our sins without being coerced in any way. And so he says here, therefore, blessed are they who humble themselves without being compelled to be humble, or rather, in other words, blessed is he that believeth in the word of God and is baptized without stubbornness of heart, yea, without being brought to know the word or even compelled to know before they will believe. For I do not mean that ye all of you have been compelled to humble yourselves, for verily I believe that there are some among you who would humble themselves. And so, he's speaking in the midst of this trial here, where they're, mistreated because of poverty, and yet, he's saying there's even a greater way, that the larger population of humanity could learn from this experience and understand that, there are these greater blessings available to us if we turn to the Lord, if we understand the value of the gospel without having to necessarily have everything else stripped away. And so I came to this conclusion, and maybe this helps clarify it. Perhaps we should find the gospel compelling without being forced, if that makes sense. In other words, it should captivate our interests. And we should be willing to part with the things of this world to seek after the things of God. Now, if the Lord takes the things of the world away from us, we haven't really made that sacrifice as much. And so there's an opportunity here before us, if we understand this, for greater blessings by greater willingness. Okay, so again, we're kind of looking at this question from the perspective of the world, and how can we make the gospel more compelling, more interesting for them, to make them, if nothing else, understand what it is and why it matters. And ultimately, there's a choice that needs to be made. We have a couple of pictures here. One is, kind of daylight. Maybe it's the beginning or end of a day, and it's bright, and it's reflective of choosing the Lord. And then on the other hand, we have the contrast of the night and the other choice, choosing the things of darkness, the things of the world. And, I thought these two pictures were kind of interesting because there's sort of reflections of the sunlight here in this nighttime picture. You see some of the same colors, those glowing orange and yellow tones, but diminished, in a much lesser extent. And that sort of represents the world to me, because the world sort of tries to put on a veneer and have a little bit of the appearance of good, but behind that veneer is all this darkness, all of these things that would take us away from the world. And so, if we're coming to present the gospel to the world, we're giving them this question, perhaps. Do you want to choose the things that look good on the surface, but have no depth and lasting value? Or do you want to choose the fullness of God's glory, all the brightness and blessings of his complete truth? And, this question, of course, from Joshua is the ultimate question that the world has to contend with. And it's our hope that we all would take it seriously, that we would all find the gospel worthy of our consideration and make the right choice.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
if we went, or instead of saying if, I'm going to say when we live our life as Jesus wants us to, and we interact with the world, we interact with people, they will see something in us that is very compelling to them. And I've had people in those times when I shown Jesus' life, where they asked me, when I saw you get hurt just now, and you didn't cuss or you didn't do what normal people would do. And I see that you've done this before. What is it about you? And that, when you hear that, you know that that was a very compelling, your spirit was very compelling to that person to want to find out about it. Why?
Yeah. That's very good. I think that we're in that position of relaying the message of the gospel in our actions and in many ways, in even our testimonies, to help the world understand why it does matter, why it is compelling. And it's certainly useful, I think, to know that the Lord isn't going to force people to make the right choice. And so it puts this incredible accountability on us to choose for ourselves. And so, really, we have an opportunity to relay that to the world in such a way that hopefully they would understand how much it means to us and how much it can bless them. And so A Song of Zion, of course, goes with that message, that it would be a choice we have to make, and to be aware of how much it can bless us if we make that choice correctly. And it also has this message within the song of urgency. Choose ye this day. Why now? Because that would minimize your risk of not knowing how much time left you have to make that choice, and also missing out on the blessings, that even those greater blessings we talked about, by choosing the Lord, with urgency as soon as possible.
The songs of Zion are extremely compelling.
Amen.
And when we show our love to visitors, that is extremely compelling too.
At the same time, while I agree with that, brother, obviously, there's a line in here in the second verse. If you'd walk on streets of gold, you must first walk in Jesus' fold. Now, lest anybody think I look down on Scripture, I believe absolutely, once Jesus calls you and you enter into a relationship with him, that to me is the ultimate being compelled, you're obligated, if I can put it that way. It's demanded on you, and Rusty told me this over and over. You have to study Scripture. And he put it that way because I told him I didn't want to study Scripture. I didn't mind singing. I was called to sing. I love to sing, but I didn't really want to. But now, having gone through that and just done it because he was so convicted that I had to do it, I understand the wisdom of what he was saying, that you really do. You can't get away from the Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon, Songs of Zion. You can't get away from these things. The compelling grows in you toward them, and you look for them for comfort and wisdom and so on. So you have to walk in Jesus' fold. His fold, I think, is Scripture. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well.
Yeah, it all connects, right? The scriptures, the songs, they certainly connect. That's why we make it a point to study both the Bible and the Book of Mormon, and we put forth these hymns of the Lord all together in these classes. That's always a goal. And I think that partly what we're looking here to do, this is the challenge before us, that we would connect the choice we have today with the reward we have later. That's why the world tends to miss why it's compelling, because it's our tendency very much so in this robe of flesh, in our mortal state, to procrastinate, to live in denial, to avoid the accountability that we have, to sort of put our heads in the sand and forget about or escape from or hide from this choice, because we don't want to work more than we have to. Studying the word, that's work. Learning about the things of God, that's as intense of a work as anything else, I would argue. And it's deep. It takes processing, and takes thought and reflection and meditation and prayer and effort and determination. But as you say here, there's a prerequisite in each of these verses. If you want to live on heaven's shore, you have to do something. If you want to walk on the streets of gold, there's something you have to do. If you want to reserve a home in heaven, there's a choice you have to make to get there. And so connecting that choice with our end, our ending state, is really what we're trying to awaken the world to understand. There couldn't be anything more compelling than that. More urgent, more essential to our well-being. And so awakening the world to this reality, awakening our young people to this reality, is something that we need to get better at doing, because the world is competing for their attention. It's competing for attention. It's doing all it can to be compelling more than the gospel, more than the things of God. And the Lord is saying here, hey, I'm not going to make you do this. You have to realize of your own accord what you believe is the better choice, the more valuable thing, the greater path to walk upon. And so this is what we're contending with. And even with our young people. Again, if we can be more articulate with them about what's going on, and as we see, I think, a downward trend with younger generations in their belief and their acceptance of Christianity, not coincidentally, we see an upward trend of trouble, of depression, of loneliness, of all sorts of problems, right? So you have these unhealthy trends going on, and I think they're related. Lynette was saying earlier that in the days of the Depression, when people were deprived of things, they were compelled to be humble. And to this day, there are saints that would hearken back to that time and say, oh, how close we were to the Lord in those days. And now in the days of prosperity, have we been able to hold on to that focus, that godly and spiritual focus? It's difficult sometimes for us to do that of our own accord. Okay, so I've got some more songs, and I know we're kind of time is getting by quickly, but we've started to touch on this a little bit. But are there challenges to this? Are there challenges for the world to find the gospel compelling? And I think the obvious answer is that it is challenging. For one reason, it's true that sin is compelling. And there's a Song of Zion that talks about having to walk away from many things. And I think that's the reality of the world, that it puts before us many flashy things that are distracting and enticing. And in the hymn, it says we have to be willing to set that aside, because those things, although they are compelling or intriguing to us, they're also competing with God's will in our lives. So they're not just offering amusement or a momentary pleasure, they're also taking us away from God's will. And so the thoughts I have here is that we need to remove the things that are impure, those things that are of the world. We need to set those things down in order to pick up the things of God. And partly what we can do to be more compelling to the world is to understand, to Brother Bob's earlier point, that we're not putting forth a partial message. It is so critically important that we understand that what we have to offer the world is the fullness of the gospel. If we only offer part of the gospel, then it's less compelling. But the restored gospel, in all its glory and power, is much more compelling. And that's what sets us apart in the Church of Jesus Christ. Because there are critical pieces of information that have been rejected by the world, but given by God. And those have put, the reality of that has put many of the churches and religions of the world at odds with the Lord. And when the Lord restored the gospel and spoke through Joseph Smith and said that, the things in the other churches are opposing to me, that's a big deal. And so when we go forth with a unique message of the fullness of the gospel, it is more compelling. And that's why, again, even in that song, Vessels of Gold, it says we have to be pure to do his work here below. If we go out to the world with only part of the gospel, we're not really going to capture them in the same way. And obviously, there are still struggles even then, right? There are struggles even with the full message, because what I've often found is that when you go to someone with the fullness of the gospel, it's overwhelming to them. That was Brother Ramon's testimony this past weekend. He said, when I started coming into this church, having already been through seminary school and other churches and training programs, he said, I've never experienced anything like this. You people aren't messing around. And he was kind of taken aback by some of it. And it is, I would say, fairly intense.
Brother John,
so, yeah.
Aren't you saying right now and mentioning Ramon and your experience, wonderful to hear about San Benito. I love that place. Aren't you confessing, in effect, that the restored gospel is for Israel? In other words, you're telling us to take it to people, but my instruction from the ministry, the restored gospel is written by Israel and it's for Israel. It's their roadmap, it's their history, it's their, and if there is strong compulsion in that gospel, it's for them. Am I wrong there? Because I study almost every day, brother. I study almost every day. And I'm amazed by it. I've been doing it for years and years and years. And I know the Lord has put compulsion in me, no matter how I may feel, up front that it's kind of a chore. He's put that in me. I understand that, just as he has with the Songs of Zion. But I honestly believe that the Book of Mormon is for Israel. How do you feel about that?
Well, the way that I would state it is that certainly the covenant that formed Israel between Abraham and God was to call a chosen people. And the Lord used that people, as you say, to receive his word, to write his word. But I think it was also to publish that word to the world. And so part of the covenant between Abraham and God was inclusive of this promise that through him, he would become a father of nations and all the world would be blessed. Now, what is that worldwide universal blessing that comes through Israel? It's the gospel to be offered to all people. And so I do think that it's a particular role, that Israel plays. And Joseph to lead the charge in restoring Israel to the restored gospel. But ultimately, that expands into an all-inclusive plan to restore every soul to the Lord. And so I think it's more encompassing, but that there are roles within the plan of God that the Lord has for each of us. A role that was given to Israel and then they sort of faded away, then a role that was given to the Gentiles to help bring Israel back, and then a role again for Israel to play and us to partner together with them, in that effort. And that's what was so beautiful to witness, even this weekend, to see the beginnings of that partnership, and I think that there must be something ahead of us that would resemble something like this, that we would transition somewhat from being nursing mothers and fathers to partners, to even seeing a leadership pronounced upon Israel to do their work, starting with Joseph, the choice seer, and all the things that have been prophesied. And so I guess I'm hesitant to even put words to it, because the plan is so big. It takes time really to elaborate all of it. And it's so easy to sort of condense it down to really small statements, that don't quite cover every aspect. And the reality of this is that, and I think we really discovered this as we went through Isaiah and Revelations and all the prophecies, that it's easy to say one thing and be misquoted and misunderstood, because the plan is so big. There's so many pieces to it that we have to sort of open our hearts and minds to a picture, a plan that is probably bigger than we can even fathom and fully digest. But hopefully that's helpful, and welcome any other thoughts or comments on it.
Brother Jeremy.
Yeah.
Quick, and we're talking about being compelled. I moved from Texas to Pennsylvania, and I started working at J.C. Penney Company. In that store, we had 3 of the saints that worked there, and they were compelled. I mean, they were really compelled to take me under their wings and bring me in. And because they were compelled, I was not looking for a church either. I was in the Baptist church, and I was I was asked one time whether or not I went to church, and I said I went and I didn't go. And one of the sisters said, you have to be hot, or either hot or cold, or you can't be lukewarm, or the Lord will spew you out of his mouth. And I was invited to come to the Church of Jesus Christ. And my invitation was with a timeline. They said, well, if you come visit us for 2 months. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I didn't have anything to lose, so I did it. And I fell in love. I was so compelled. We moved from Pennsylvania to the Maryland area, and I was not baptized, but we went back to visit. And I tell you that Sunday when we went back, I was compelled to stand on my feet and ask for my baptism, because I was afraid I couldn't make it home alive. I was compelled to serve the Lord. And I love the church. And I love the love in the church. I love the brothers and the sisters, the children of the saints of the Most High God. So I was compelled. The church was compelled to come to me, and I'm so happy that I was compelled to open my heart to come into the church. So that's my being compelled, brother.
Yeah, I love that. it's kind of like we need to compel ourselves. We
Right.
need to be so driven of our own accord, but in no less intensity to pursue the things of God, to understand that we really have no other choice, no other good choice is before us, but the Lord. And that's actually related to what I preached on at C. Benito, that in thinking of our young people and even those in the world who maybe don't appreciate or understand the value of the things of God, that the world will offer you things and they look enticing and you can choose them, but you never win in the world. There's never a good outcome from that. And you can go through all these things to be accepted of the world, to fit in, and that's part of the hook, isn't it? That the world says, well, if you don't do the things that we do, then you must be looking down on us, maybe self-righteous, or maybe making us feel guilty for the things that we're doing. And so it's much easier for the world to accept you if you're doing the things that they're doing. And it's almost like an entrance criteria. And maybe if you do these things, if you look like the world and jump through these hoops, they might reciprocate and they might accept you. But to what end? If we give ourselves to the Lord, he always reciprocates. He always accepts you. He always blesses you, and you always win. So in the Lord, you always win. In the world, you always lose. That's the kind of clarity we need for our loved ones, our neighbors, our children, to understand that this is a clear choice. If you understood it, if you gave it the proper consideration, you would come to a conclusion that it's a compelling choice, that it's the only choice. Yeah, sister, go ahead. I think there was a comment.
Well, if I could add to that, just what you just said, Brother Jeremy. If the gospel doesn't draw you, if you don't feel compelled, it's in the 39th verse. Alma presents them this experiment and try this seed, plant the seed. And he tells them the seed is the word of God, and we know that the seed is good. That's the beginning of the experiment. But if it doesn't work in you, if it doesn't draw you, in the 39th verse, now this is not because the seed was not good, neither is it because the fruit thereof would not be desirable, but it is because your ground is barren. See, it's you. Don't blame the gospel or the word. If it doesn't have an effect on you, it's you. And if you go to 2 Peter, it'll even tell you what to do if your ground is barren. And there's a list of many things. You could read it all, and you have to fertilize and give that seed a chance to grow. That's all.
Yeah, that's very good. I think we can add that to our tool belt, as we look at ways to illustrate this to the world, that we might come up with those kinds of analogies to say, well, maybe it's not that the gospel isn't compelling. It might be that you're missing the point, that your perception is part of it, right? Yeah, Sister Betty?
Yes, I was, being that we're speaking of the seed of Joseph, a few years back, well, many years maybe, when Brother Dan Picciuto in San Carlos was speaking, an Indian sister named Lillian Quesada was questioning the truth of our church. And she listened to him. And then that night she had a dream, and she heard a voice give her these numbers: 3, 27, 1, 15. And she looked through the Bible, she looked through the hymn book, couldn't find these numbers. Finally, she went to the Book of Mormon, And in 3rd Nephi, 27th chapter, verse 1 to 15, the Lord is saying, the name of my church is the Church of Jesus Christ. And that proved to her, she said that she had to know that this is his church.
Yeah, the manifestations of God, which are present in the fullness of the gospel, in the fully restored doctrine that the Lord intended, are evidences, compelling evidences, right, of the truth. And that's part of our job too, to share those things, those testimonies, and how the power of God is evident. And why is it that we see the miracles? Why do we see the signs and wonders? And doesn't the scripture give us the answer that these things shall follow those that follow the fullness of the gospel?
Amen.
Well, I think I'll do that song after all, because we're not going to be able to build up the next two with the time we have, which is good. I felt like we might spend a couple nights on this, and we're about halfway through the slides, so that works out pretty well. But yeah, let me do that song real quick. If you would live on heaven's shore with one so dear, you so adore, a mansion bright, you would reason. Choose ye this day whom you will see. Choose carefully your master to Jesus Christ. Each must bow. If heaven's home, you are reason. Choose ye this day whom you will. If you would taste of glory sweet, lay every sin at Jesus' feet. And if you'd walk on streets of gold, you must first walk in Jesus' fold. Choose carefully your master, Jesus Christ. Each knee must bow. If heaven's home you are reason, choose ye this day. If you would look on Jesus' face, then enter in, be saved by grace. Earth's treasures quickly turn to rust, as earthly bodies turn to dust. Choose carefully your master now, to Jesus Christ. Each knee must bow. If heaven's home you are reason, choose ye this day whom you see. The shadows fall as night sets in, a dark abyss for souls in sin. Repent, repent of all deeds done, lest Satan play another one. Choose carefully your master, to Jesus Christ. Teach me most God. Heaven's home, you would reason. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. You know, that line in particular stands out for me. It's earth's treasures quickly turn to rust, and earthly bodies turn to dust. And so, you know, there just isn't a permanence to the things of the world and this mortal life. And so that's such a terrifying thought to the people of the world that they just don't even think about it, right? They don't confront that idea. They dismiss it altogether and sort of live in denial about it. But the beauty of it is that the Lord has a remedy for that problem. And we mentioned earlier, you know, that part of finding the gospel compelling is understanding and appreciating the miracle of this life. And I would say that one thing we can tell the world is that it is a stunning miracle that we exist, that we've been born and live. But the end of our lives is no less miraculous. The soul lives on. This miracle of life doesn't end with the passing of the flesh. It goes beyond that. And so the story of our lives is bigger than the world realizes. And what a comforting message, you know, for people who, you know, might fear death, might dread the ending, and to hear a message that, well, it's actually not an ending. It's a transition. It's a new phase. You know, that should be comforting. That should be compelling for the world to hear. Well, the hour went quickly. Any last thoughts or comments or questions before we wrap up tonight?
You
No,
know,
Brother
when,
Jeremy,
Yeah.
this is my testimony, blessed, but compelled to be humble. I came into the church kind of late. You know, I was in my mid-30s, and but I was always around the church. I was always there, but never baptized in the church. And I always struggled with that, just wasn't able to do it. But one day I said, you know, in my middle 30s, I said, Lord, if you want me, you're going to have to do it. And it was just like a weight was taken off of me, and I didn't bother me anymore, you know. But I had a dream. I saw a tornado coming, and I was running around trying to get my camera. And I got the camera and I opened the door of the house, and it was right on top of my house. And I tried to get the door shut, I think like 3 times, but it just flew open. I woke up, but you know, I was pretty sick for 20 some years, 20, you know, I spent most of that time in bed. But in that time, there was a time that repentance came. You know, I called my dad. I said, I want to be baptized. But I told him, I said, Dad, it's not because I'm sick. It's just, you know, one day, you know, you can, you know, that saying, say the same sun that melts the ice hardens the clay. It can go either way, but, you know, but but I thank God, you know, sometimes you need to be compelled. And thank God, you know, you even read accounts in the scriptures how others were compelled. And look at what happened to sons of Mosiah and Alma, you know, brought close to death. But it had the necessary effect through the prayers of their, you know, their parents or grandparents, or same thing we do today.
The powerful testimony. I don't know if I've heard some of that before. That was good to hear. And I think we learn a lesson sometimes from things too. We might be compelled at one time, and then later in life, remember that. And maybe become more willing and achieve those greater blessings at that point. I think there was another comment, was there?
Yeah, I wanted to say, there's been times that I want to compel my children. I want God to compel my children. And I pray to that effect. But, oftentimes while I'm doing that, I worry and I ask God, compel them, but don't hurt them. You know, we don't know what might happen when we compel, when we ask God to compel our children. How's he going to do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe the Lord is compelling the American Indian today, because these days, when you talk to them, they tell you how drugs and alcohol and suicide has ravaged their tribe, their people, their family. Sons are raised and they commit suicide over and over and over again. And I believe the American Indian is being hurt, and that it is compelling him to find what else there is, because they have the sweat lodge, they have peyote, they have all the traditional Indian ways, all of them, the dances, the drums. It's not working. It's now they're losing too many family members. I believe they are compelled today, maybe as never before. And it's horrible, but it hurts them, no doubt. It crushes, in many cases, crushes them. And they are compelled to go and seek God.
Well, I would agree that there's no more extreme example of compelling than the scattering of Israel and the things that they have faced over, many, hundreds, over a millennia and more, right? It's interesting when you work with the natives that one of the things that they're dealing with is sort of forgiving and letting go or healing from that compelling at the hand of the Gentiles. It's not an easy thing. And it's true that there are many practices that don't line up to Christ, and they are problematic. But one of the key things that they often will say is that we do have a spirituality. And I think that's true, that they have a sense of spirituality that runs very deep. And there's sort of threads of that and similarities in what they do that parallel the truth in many ways. And so I think there are some things that they'll have to let go of and some things that they'll bring to the table that we lack. Sometimes a sincerity and a depth and a spirituality that comes from deprivation, comes from having nothing else, right? And I don't know of a people who've had less. And so sometimes when everything else is stripped away, there's an understanding, a perception there that they do understand. And so what they do is they come and they say, understand us, and that we're not all bad. We have some things to offer as well. And so there's kind of a careful balance there, I think, where we can receive their talents and appreciate them, and vice versa. And I think this is what we're starting to see happen. I think that's how it's going to take shape, that this partnership will begin to form, really between all of God's people. And just like the Lord makes each of us so differently. Have you ever thought about that? The fact that we have different fingerprints, different personalities. Everyone is unique. Everyone is individual and has different talents from God to bring. And that's true for Joseph. They have, I mean, when I see them, I see such a noble people of depth. And you know, it was interesting to hear them talk a lot this past weekend, and some of the comments they would make, things like, we heard you make some promises today. And you know how they're sensitive to that and keeping promises. And I thought to myself, I didn't even register that we made promises today, but they listen closely and they remember. And so, you know, maybe they take words more seriously than we do. I think that's true, you know, and so I think we all have something to learn from each other. I think we all have a need for that meekness and humility. And I'll tell you, I think we're in a time when, not to get off on too many tangents at once, but we're in a time of great opposition to these things. And we're going to see greater opposition, and we're going to see greater power of God simultaneously rising up in our day. And we're going to see the opposition in some ways come forth in the form of tyranny. And I would say that the antidote to tyranny is meekness. And so the meek shall inherit the earth, is what the scriptures say. And the leadership of the world that fails is going to be replaced by God's leading. And so there's so much to take from this. In the coming class, we're going to continue on next week with more and equip ourselves, hopefully, with words that are compelling, that we would be effective witnesses and ambassadors of Christ to our loved ones, to those that we don't even know yet, but will come to love. And I would also ask one more thing from you, if you could. We did our MBA regional outreach to San Benito this quarter. Next quarter, we're going to do it here in Denver. And it's a different kind of MBA activity. We're not necessarily in a revival mode because it's an outpost. We don't really have people to revive here. It's an outreach. It's starting from scratch. And so we're going to be fasting and praying weekly, leading up to an event on Memorial Day weekend to hopefully begin to do some outreach here in Denver and push the gospel into new places, new lives, new souls. We could use your prayers for that. And so may God bless you. And again, a big thank you to our brother Greg, who helped me the last couple of weeks. Appreciate it very much. We enjoyed our trip and the break, and also the time with the saints in San Benito. So wonderful things happening in the Church of Jesus Christ, and it's only going to get more exciting as the time goes by. So.
Thank you, Brother Greg. Beautiful.
Well, with that, hope you all have a blessed weekend. And Brother Chat, could I turn it over to you for a closing prayer? Make sure and unmute, brother. Can you unmute for us, Brother Chat? Sorry.
Our righteous and glorious Father, we thank you for this opportunity that we have had this night. We, Heavenly Father, have been lifted up, and we've been compelled by your strength and your wonder and your thoughtfulness of us. That makes us, Heavenly Father, also compelled, not by a push of our own, but just be compelled to love one another, to do that which is right, to have that willingness to reach out to the world and let them know about your Son, Jesus Christ. What an opportunity, Father, that we had just to think about being compelled and having His word embedded in our minds and in our hearts. We ask, Heavenly Father, that as we leave one another tonight, that you bless each and every one of us, those who are sick and afflicted, or those who need prayer to be lifted up from their beds of affliction. We pray for them. We're compelled, Father, to do all these things. And above all things, we are compelled to forgive one another for our shortcomings and for the greatest thing that we have, that we should love one another as you have loved us. We thank you again, Father, for this night that thou hast given us. We ask these in all things in the name of Jesus Christ, a loving Savior. Amen.
Brother
Amen.
Chad, when is your surgery?
On the 18th of